To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Ryan Summers had killed 17 men in Afghanistan. Each death was clean, precise, and necessary. He remembered every face, every last breath, every moment their eyes went cold. It wasn't something that haunted him. It was simply who he was. A predator disguised as a protector. The suburban house on Maple Street looked nothing like the compound in Kandahar where he'd earned his reputation as the ghost. Here, white picket fences replaced razor wire, and the morning coffee routine substituted for pre-dawn briefings. But beneath the carefully constructed facade of normalcy, Ryan remained what he'd always been, a weapon waiting for a target. His marriage to Rebecca Miller had been a strategic decision as much as a romantic one. She was beautiful, with honey blonde hair and emerald eyes that could melt ice. More importantly, she was the daughter of Judge Harold Miller, a man whose connections could prove valuable for a soldier transitioning to civilian life. Ryan had courted her with the same methodical precision he'd used to infiltrate enemy strongholds. "You're so different from other men," Rebecca had whispered on their third date, her fingers tracing the scars on his forearms. "There's something dangerous about you, but safe at the same time." She had no idea how right she was about the dangerous part. Their wedding had been a spectacle. Rebecca's father spared no expense. 500 guests, an orchestra, and enough flowers to perfume half the county. Ryan played the part of the devoted groom perfectly, his smile never wavering even as he cataloged every exit, every potential threat, every face in the crowd. Old habits. 2 years of marriage had settled into a comfortable routine. Ryan worked as a private security consultant, a job that paid well and asked few questions about his methods. Rebecca managed their social calendar and volunteer work, the perfect military wife transitioning seamlessly to civilian spouse. They had a nice life, respectable and quiet. But Ryan noticed things others missed. It was in his nature. The way Rebecca's phone was always face down now. How she'd started wearing perfume to run errands. The subtle changes in her body language when she thought he wasn't watching. Her increased interest in fitness. The new lingerie hidden in the back of her drawer. The mysterious girls' nights that seemed to happen with increasing frequency. Most husbands might have confronted their wives immediately, demanded answers, threatened divorce. Ryan wasn't most husbands. He was a hunter, and hunters waited for the perfect moment to strike. He began his surveillance 3 weeks ago. It was almost insultingly easy to track Rebecca's movements. She had no operational security, no awareness of being watched. She was a civilian, soft and careless. Following her led him to discover Nick Ward, 6'2", dark hair, badge number 4471 with the county sheriff's department. A Boy Scout playing at being dangerous, everything Ryan actually was, but wrapped in a more socially acceptable package. Their affair had been going on for 4 months. Lunch meetings that turned into afternoon hotel visits. Stolen kisses in parking lots. Long text message exchanges during what should have been family dinners. Rebecca had even been sloppy enough to use their shared credit card for some of her romantic gestures. Flowers sent to NW at the police station, dinner reservations for 2 at restaurants Ryan had never been to. The rage Ryan felt wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a normal betrayed husband. It was cold, calculating, and absolute. Rebecca had made the mistake of thinking she was married to an ordinary man, someone who would beg and plead and try to win her back. She was about to learn the difference between a sheep and a wolf. As he watched her apply lipstick in their bedroom mirror before another book club meeting, Ryan made his decision. The game had gone on long enough. It was time for Rebecca and her cop boyfriend to discover exactly who they'd been betraying. Tonight would be the last night Rebecca Miller Summers slept safely in her bed. Chapter 2. The Other Woman's Heart. Rebecca Summers stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, practicing the lies she would tell when she got home. The guilt had long since faded into something more dangerous, excitement. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. Growing up as Judge Harold Miller's daughter had been a gilded cage. Every decision scrutinized, every relationship evaluated for political advantage, every public appearance carefully orchestrated. When she'd met Ryan at a Veterans Day charity gala, he'd seemed like the perfect escape. Dangerous enough to make her feel rebellious, respectable enough to satisfy her father. The early days of their marriage had been intoxicating. Ryan's intensity, his quiet strength, the way he could make her feel safe and desired simultaneously. But as the months passed, that same intensity began to feel suffocating. He noticed everything, every glance, every word, every change in routine. Living with Ryan was like being under constant surveillance. She'd met Nick Ward during a routine traffic stop 6 months ago. A broken taillight had led to flirtation, which had led to coffee, which had led to the most passionate affair of her life. Nick was everything Ryan wasn't: spontaneous, emotionally available, willing to laugh at her jokes, and share his own vulnerabilities. "You deserve better than a man who treats you like a mission objective," Nick had told her just last week, his hands tangled in her hair as they lay in the hotel room that had become their sanctuary. "You're not a target to be acquired, Becca. You're a woman who should be worshipped." The contrast was intoxicating. Where Ryan was controlled and calculating, Nick was passionate and impulsive. Where Ryan planned every conversation, Nick spoke from the heart. Where Ryan made love with military precision, Nick made her feel like she was drowning in desire. Rebecca knew she was playing a dangerous game. Ryan wasn't the type of man who would simply accept betrayal and walk away. But she also couldn't bring herself to care anymore. She was tired of being the perfect wife, the ideal daughter, the flawless public figure. With Nick, she could be Rebecca, not Judge Miller's daughter or Soldier Summer's wife, just herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nick. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I have something important to tell you." Her heart fluttered. They'd been talking about the future more frequently lately, making plans that didn't include her current marriage. Nick had been hinting about something big, something that would change everything. Maybe tonight would finally be the night he asked her to leave Ryan for good. She applied another coat of mascara and checked her appearance one final time. The red dress was new, purchased specifically for Nick's enjoyment. Ryan would never notice. He'd stopped really seeing her months ago, treating her more like a household asset than a wife. "Going to book club," she called out as she grabbed her purse. Ryan's acknowledgement from his office was barely audible, his attention focused on whatever military consultation he was working on. It was almost too easy. As she drove toward their usual meeting spot, Rebecca allowed herself to imagine a different life. A small house somewhere far from her father's political influence and Ryan's suffocating control. Morning coffee with a man who actually listened when she spoke. Children who would grow up in a home filled with laughter instead of strategic silence. She was so lost in her daydream that she almost missed the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. For a moment, her heart leaped. Had Nick decided to surprise her with a romantic traffic stop? But as the patrol car pulled alongside her, she realized it wasn't Nick behind the wheel. Her phone rang. Nick's voice was tight with tension. "Becca, we need to talk. Something's wrong, I think." The line went dead just as the officer motioned for her to pull over. Rebecca's perfect world was about to become a nightmare, and she had no idea that her husband had been orchestrating every move from the shadows. Chapter 3: The Reckoning Begins. The blue and red lights painted the night in violent colors as Rebecca pulled her Mercedes to the shoulder of Highway 47. Her hands trembled as she watched the officer approach in her side mirror. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the predatory grace she'd learned to recognize in dangerous men. This wasn't Nick. But then the passenger door opened, and her breath caught in her throat. Ryan slid into the seat beside her, his presence filling the small space like smoke from a wildfire. He was wearing his black tactical gear, the same outfit he'd worn for private security jobs, and his eyes held the cold emptiness she'd glimpsed only once before, the night he'd woken from a nightmare screaming in Arabic. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying the deceptive calm that preceded violence. "Out for another book club meeting?" Before she could respond, someone tapped on her window. Nick Ward stood outside, but he wasn't the confident, cocky cop she'd fallen in love with. His face was pale, his uniform wrinkled, and there was fear in his eyes, genuine, primal terror. Ryan rolled down the window. "Officer Ward, thank you for following my instructions. Now, would you like to tell my wife what you told me 30 minutes ago?" Nick's voice cracked. "Rebecca, this man, he's not what you think he is." "I'm exactly what she thinks I am," Ryan corrected quietly. "The question is whether you understand what that means." He turned to Rebecca, and his smile was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen. "Nick here has been very informative about your relationship. For months, 17 hotel visits, 6 romantic dinners, and approximately 300 text messages that would make a sailor blush." Rebecca's blood turned to ice. "Ryan, I can explain." "No need." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, laying it on her lap. I have photographs, credit card receipts, hotel surveillance footage, and a complete record of both your phones for the past 6 months. I know about the pregnancy scare last month. False alarm, by the way, and I know about Nick's promise to divorce his own wife and run away with you. Nick stepped back from the car. Look, man, we can work this out. I'll transfer departments. We'll end it. Whatever you want. What I want, Ryan interrupted, his voice never rising above conversational level, is for you to get in your patrol car and drive to the coordinates I'm about to text you. You have 15 minutes. If you're late, or if you contact anyone, or if you deviate from the route by even 1 block, things will become very unpleasant for everyone involved. You can't threaten a police officer. Ryan's laugh was genuine, almost warm. Officer Ward, I've spent the last week learning everything about your life. Your wife Karen thinks you're working late to pay for your daughter's ballet lessons. Your sergeant believes you're investigating a cold case on your own time. Your mortgage company expects your next payment in 12 days, and your bookie needs $3,000 by Friday, or he's going to be very upset about your gambling problem. Nick's face went ashen. How did you? Because I'm very good at my job. The question now is whether you're smart enough to follow simple instructions, or if I need to add your name to a much longer list. Rebecca found her voice. What list? Ryan, what are you talking about? He turned to her with that same terrifying smile. The list of people who thought they could betray me and walk away unharmed. It's a short list, honey, because most of them don't live long enough to make it worthwhile. Nick fumbled for his radio, but Ryan's voice stopped him cold. I wouldn't. Your backup isn't coming, by the way. I may have mentioned to dispatch that you were conducting a routine traffic stop and wouldn't need assistance. Amazing how much authority a former special operations colonel can project over a radio. The pieces clicked together in Rebecca's mind with sickening clarity. The private security job, the mysterious overseas contracts, the way Ryan could disappear for weeks at a time and return with money and no explanations. Her husband wasn't just a veteran. He was something much more dangerous. My wife's boyfriend, a cop, pulled me over, Ryan said conversationally, as if reciting a story he'd heard somewhere. I'm taking your car, your house, and your wife, soldier. That's what you said to me last month when you thought I was just another suburban husband, isn't it, Nick? Nick's mouth moved, but no sound came out. And Rebecca, in the passenger's seat, yelled, Honey, this coward soldier might pee in his pants if you threaten him like this. Ryan's smile widened. You both had quite a laugh about it, didn't you? About the stupid soldier who didn't know his wife was fucking a real man. Rebecca's world was collapsing around her. Ryan, please. He went to put me in cuffs, Ryan continued, his tone almost dreamy with memory. He had no idea who I really was. Neither of you did. But you're about to learn. He handed Nick a piece of paper through the window. Those are your instructions. Follow them exactly, or I'll show you what I learned in places that don't exist on any map. Do we understand each other? Nick took the paper with shaking hands and stumbled back to his patrol car. Rebecca watched him drive away, leaving her alone with the stranger she'd been married to for 2 years. Now then, Ryan said, settling back in the passenger seat as if they were heading to dinner instead of whatever hell he'd constructed for them. Let's go home and discuss your future. What's left of it? Chapter 4, The Hunter's Preparation. Ryan's home office had always been off-limits to Rebecca, secured with locks that seemed excessive for a suburban house. As he led her inside for the first time, she understood why. The room looked like a military command center, multiple monitors displaying satellite feeds, detailed maps of the county marked with red pins, and a wall covered with photographs and documents connected by red string like something from a conspiracy thriller. But it was the photographs that made her knees weak. Pictures of her and Nick at restaurants, in hotel parking lots, kissing goodbye after their secret meetings. Surveillance photos taken from impossible angles with professional-grade equipment. Her entire affair documented with the thoroughness of a federal investigation. Sit down, Ryan instructed, gesturing to a chair positioned directly in front of the evidence wall. Let me explain how this is going to work. Rebecca sank into the chair, her red dress now feeling like a scarlet letter. How long have you known? Since the beginning. I watched your first lunch with Officer Ward, your first kiss, your first trip to the Riverside Inn. Ryan moved to stand behind his desk, every inch the commanding officer addressing a subordinate. I have audio recordings of you planning to leave me, video of you ridiculing our marriage, and a complete financial audit showing how you've been funding your affair with our joint accounts. You've been watching me for months? The violation felt worse than the adultery somehow. What kind of man does that? The kind who learned never to underestimate his enemies. Ryan pressed a button on his desk, and one of the monitors flickered to life, showing security footage of Nick entering an apartment building. Your boyfriend just arrived at his destination. Would you like to see what happens next? On screen, Nick climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked on apartment 3B. The door opened to reveal a woman Rebecca didn't recognize, brunette, attractive, clearly pregnant. Nick's wife, Karen Ward, Ryan explained helpfully. 6 months pregnant with her second child. She's been working double shifts as a nurse to cover the medical bills while Nick pisses away their savings on poker games and his affair with you. Rebecca watched in horror as Nick spoke to his wife, gesturing frantically. Karen's face cycled through confusion, hurt, and finally rage as she began shouting. The audio was too low to make out words, but the meaning was clear. I gave Nick a choice, Ryan continued. He could confess everything to his wife right now, tonight, and face the consequences like a man. Or I could do it for him in much more creative ways. You're insane. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Ryan pulled out his phone and showed her a text message thread. Nick chose option 1. Smart boy. Of course, that's just the beginning of his problems. Rebecca forced herself to look away from the screen. What do you want from me? I want you to understand the position you're in. Ryan walked around the desk and crouched in front of her chair, close enough that she could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something else, something dangerous and metallic. You thought you were cheating on a soldier. A simple man who would either fight for you or let you go. You had no idea you were betraying an assassin. You're lying. Am I? He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a leather portfolio, flipping it open to reveal military commendations, photographs of him with high-ranking officials, and documents with heavy black redactions. 12 years, Special Operations Command, Black Ops, deep cover, wet work, whatever euphemism makes you comfortable. I was very good at making problems disappear permanently. Rebecca's mind raced, trying to reconcile the husband she'd lived with for 2 years with the predator sitting in front of her. The security consulting is exactly what it sounds like. Private military contractors pay very well for certain skills, and they ask very few questions about methods. Ryan closed the portfolio and set it aside. Which brings us to your current situation. He returned to his desk and pulled up another file on his computer. Your father, the judge, has been taking bribes from the Kellerman crime family for 3 years. I have financial records, recorded phone calls, and photographic evidence of him meeting with Maurice Gonzalez, their money laundering specialist. Rebecca felt the room spinning. That's impossible. My father would never. Your father has been selling verdicts and fixing sentences to pay for his gambling addiction. The same addiction that cost him his inheritance and put a second mortgage on your childhood home. Ryan's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was reading a weather report. I could have that information on the FBI's desk within the hour. You're blackmailing me. I'm explaining your options. Ryan stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the suburban street as if surveying a battlefield. Option 1. You can try to leave. File for divorce, move in with Nick, start fresh somewhere new. Of course, your father will be arrested within 24 hours. Your lover will be fired from the police force for conduct unbecoming, and you'll both find yourselves unemployable anywhere in this state. Rebecca's hands clenched in her lap. And option 2. You stay? Play the loving wife. Help me with a project I've been planning. He turned back to face her, and his smile was pure predator. See, I've learned some interesting things about this county while investigating your affair. Corrupt cops, dirty judges, untouchable criminals who think they're above consequences. A whole ecosystem of parasites feeding off decent people's misery. What kind of project? The kind that puts my particular skills to good use. And the kind that gives you a chance to earn back what you've lost. Ryan returned to his chair and leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. Help me clean house, Rebecca. Help me remove the rot from this county's power structure. Do that, and I might consider letting you live with the consequences of your betrayal instead of dying from them. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Rebecca realized she was trapped in a web she'd never seen being spun, caught between a husband who was far more dangerous than she'd imagined and a future that promised nothing but pain. What exactly are you asking me to do? Ryan's smile widened, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw exactly who he really was underneath the suburban disguise. I'm asking you to help me wage war. And the first target is everyone who helped you betray me. Chapter 5. The Web Titans. 3 days after her world collapsed, Rebecca sat in the passenger seat of Ryan's black BMW, watching him check his weapons with the casual efficiency of a man preparing for grocery shopping. The shoulder holster, the ankle piece, the ceramic knife hidden in his boot, all invisible once he pulled on his jacket, transforming back into the respectable businessman their neighbors knew. "Remember," he said, adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror, "we're here to support Judge Miller during his difficult time. You're the loving daughter standing by her father." Rebecca stared at the county courthouse where she'd played as a child, back when she'd believed her father was a hero dispensing justice with wisdom and integrity. Now she knew better. He doesn't know you have the evidence. Harold thinks he's being blackmailed by the Kellerman family. He's been making increasingly desperate decisions trying to keep them quiet. Ryan started the engine, his voice carrying that familiar note of predatory satisfaction, which makes what happens next so much more interesting. They drove in silence through downtown, past the sheriff's department where Nick Ward was presumably suffering through his second day of suspended duty pending an internal investigation. Ryan had been busy since their confrontation on Highway 47, pulling strings and manipulating outcomes with surgical precision. "How did you get him suspended so quickly?" Rebecca asked. "I didn't have to get him suspended. I just had to make sure his wife found the right evidence at the right time." Ryan turned into the courthouse parking lot, selecting a space with clear sight lines to all exits. Karen Ward is a very thorough woman when she's motivated. She found the hotel receipts, the text messages, and the credit card statements I helped her discover. Amazing what an angry wife can accomplish when she puts her mind to it. Rebecca watched courthouse employees arriving for work, normal people living normal lives, oblivious to the chess game being played around them. "What did you promise her?" "Nothing. I simply provided her with the tools to destroy her husband's career and take him for everything in the divorce." Ryan's smile was cold. "She's doing it for free, out of righteous fury. The best kind of weapon." They entered the courthouse through the judge's private entrance, Rebecca's familiarity with the building allowing them to avoid the metal detectors and security checkpoints. Her father's chambers occupied the northeast corner of the third floor, a suite of offices she'd visited countless times during her childhood. Judge Harold Miller looked like he'd aged a decade in the past week. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, and his hands shook as he poured coffee from the machine in his office. "Daddy." Rebecca knocked on the open door, playing her role perfectly. "I came as soon as I heard about the investigation." Harold's head snapped up, relief and terror warring across his features. "Rebecca, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." His eyes focused on Ryan, and suspicion replaced the momentary hope. "Ryan, I didn't expect to see you here." "Family emergency," Ryan replied smoothly, settling into one of the leather chairs facing Harold's desk. "Rebecca was worried about you, sir." "We both were." Harold's laugh was bitter. "Worried?" "Yes. Well, you should be. They have everything, Rebecca. Bank records, phone calls, photographs. 23 years on the bench, and it's all going to end in disgrace." "Who has everything, Daddy?" Rebecca moved to stand behind her father's chair, one hand on his shoulder in a gesture of support that felt like betrayal. "The FBI raided Maurice Gonzalez's offices yesterday morning. Found detailed records of every payment, every fixed case, every bent verdict." Harold buried his face in his hands. "They're offering him immunity in exchange for testimony." "My testimony? Against everyone." Ryan leaned forward slightly, the picture of concerned family. "What kind of testimony?" "The Kellerman operation goes deeper than anyone imagined. Judges, cops, city council members, even the mayor, were all on their payroll somehow." Harold looked up at Rebecca with desperate eyes. "I never meant for it to go this far, sweetheart. It started with one small favor, just a reduced sentence for a minor drug charge. But then they had leverage, and it snowballed, and suddenly I was in too deep to get out." Rebecca felt genuinely sick. "How long, Daddy?" 3 years. Maybe 4. I lost track." Harold's voice cracked. "The gambling started after your mother died. I couldn't cope with the grief, and poker was the only thing that made me feel human again. But I kept losing, and the debts kept mounting, and when Maurice approached me with a solution—" "You said yes," Ryan finished quietly. "I said yes." Harold stood and walked to the window overlooking the county square. "Now they want me to wear a wire, record conversations with other judges, help them build cases against half the power structure in this county. If I refuse, I go to prison for 20 years. If I cooperate, I might get 5. Ryan and Rebecca exchanged glances. This was the moment they'd planned for. The opening Ryan had been maneuvering toward since the night he'd revealed himself. There might be another option, Ryan said carefully. Harold turned from the window. What kind of option? The kind that requires trust and courage and a willingness to fight back against people who've been using you. Ryan stood and moved to the window, scanning the square below as if checking for threats. Tell me, Harold, are you tired of being a victim? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we turn the tables. Instead of you testifying against the Kellerman family, we make them testify against each other. Ryan turned back to face Harold, and his smile was razor-sharp. I'm suggesting we remove their leadership permanently and let their organization collapse from within. Harold's eyes widened. Ryan, that sounds like justice. Long overdue justice. Ryan returned to his chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes burning with intensity. I've spent the past week studying their operation, Harold. They're parasites. They corrupt good people like you, destroy families like Nick Ward's, and poison everything they touch. The legal system can't stop them because they own too many pieces of it. You're talking about vigilante justice. I'm talking about war. The kind of war I'm trained to fight and win. Ryan looked at Rebecca, including her in the conspiracy. The question is whether you're ready to stop being their puppet and start being their nightmare. Harold sank back into his chair, the weight of the decision visible on his face. What would you need from me? Ryan's smile was the last thing his enemies would ever see. Everything. Chapter 6. Sins of the Father. The Kellerman family held court in a converted warehouse on the south side of town, a sprawling complex hidden behind legitimate businesses and razor wire. Ryan crouched on the roof of the adjacent building, his sniper's scope providing a perfect view of the compound's security weaknesses. 3 days of surveillance had given him everything he needed to know about their operation. Maurice Gonzalez arrived every morning at 9 a.m. sharp, driving a black Escalade with bulletproof glass and accompanied by 2 bodyguards who looked like they'd learned violence in prison rather than the military. The money laundering operation ran out of the 3rd floor, where accountants and lawyers processed dirty cash through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. But it was the basement that interested Ryan most. That's where they kept their insurance policies, detailed records of every politician, judge, and law enforcement officer on their payroll. Harold Miller was just one name in a file containing dozens of others, each representing a life destroyed by greed and fear. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Package delivered. Ryan smiled grimly. His wife was proving surprisingly adaptable to their new arrangement. This morning, she'd visited Karen Ward under the guise of offering support during her divorce proceedings. In reality, she'd been delivering a manila envelope containing evidence of Maurice Gonzalez's connection to several unsolved murders in the county, evidence that would find its way to the FBI through Karen's contacts in law enforcement. The dominoes were falling exactly as Ryan had planned. His earpiece crackled with Harold's voice. They want to meet. Tonight. Maurice says he has new instructions from the family. Location. The warehouse. He wants me to bring the files on the upcoming Peterson case, the one where his nephew is facing drug trafficking charges. Ryan adjusted his scope, focusing on the building's main entrance. Perfect. What time? 8 o'clock. Ryan, I'm scared. If they suspect I'm working with anyone, they won't. You're going to give them exactly what they want, and they're going to thank you for it. Ryan's voice carried the calm authority that had kept his men alive in Afghanistan. Trust the plan, Harold. By tomorrow morning, your problems are going to be solved permanently. That evening, Ryan positioned himself in the warehouse's ventilation system, a position that provided both perfect acoustics and multiple escape routes. The meeting space below was a converted conference room where Maurice Gonzalez conducted his business with the casual arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. Harold arrived precisely at 8, his hands shaking as he carried a briefcase containing the files Maurice had requested. But hidden among the legal documents were several additions, evidence that would implicate Maurice in crimes he'd never committed, carefully forged documents that would redirect FBI attention away from the judges and toward the money men. Judge Miller. Maurice greeted him warmly, gesturing to a chair at the polished conference table. Always a pleasure. I trust you have what we discussed. Everything you asked for. Harold opened the briefcase with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd made this exchange dozens of times before. The Peterson case files, the upcoming sentencing recommendations, and the background checks on the new district attorney candidates. Maurice leafed through the documents with satisfaction. Excellent. The family appreciates your continued cooperation, especially during these challenging times. About that, Harold began, his voice carefully controlled. I've been thinking about my situation with the FBI. If they keep pressuring me for testimony, you let us worry about the FBI. Morris's tone hardened slightly. Your job is to keep doing what you've been doing. Fix the cases we need fixed, bury the evidence we need buried, and keep your mouth shut about everything else. Harold nodded, but Ryan could see the man's knuckles were white where he gripped the briefcase handle. And if they offer me immunity in exchange for cooperation, then you tell them you don't know anything about any cooperation. You're a respected judge who's never taken a bribe or fixed a case in his life. Maurice leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because if you say anything different, Judge Miller, we'll make sure your daughter suffers the consequences of your stupidity. That was the moment Ryan had been waiting for. The threat against Rebecca, recorded in crystal clarity, would provide the legal justification for everything that came next. Maurice was still talking when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in 30 seconds later, bathing the room in an eerie red glow that turned shadows into monsters. Maurice was shouting orders to his bodyguards, who were fumbling for weapons and flashlights in the darkness. Harold remained frozen in his chair, following Ryan's instructions to stay exactly where he was no matter what happened. The first bodyguard died silently, Ryan's knife slicing through his carotid artery before the man could draw his weapon. The second managed to clear leather before Ryan's garrote ended his life with professional efficiency. Both bodies dropped to the floor with barely a whisper. Maurice spun in circles, his voice rising to panic as he realized he was alone with Harold in a room that had become a tomb. Where are they? Where are my men? He pulled out his own pistol, a shiny chrome piece that screamed amateur hour to Ryan's trained eye. Harold found his voice. They're dead, just like you're going to be. What are you talking about? You're a judge, not a killer. No, Ryan said, dropping from the ceiling vent directly behind Maurice. He's not. But I am. Maurice spun, bringing his weapon to bear, but Ryan was already moving. A single blow to the wrist sent the gun skittering across the floor, and Maurice found himself on his knees with Ryan's knife pressed against his throat. Maurice Gonzalez, Ryan said conversationally. Money launderer, extortionist, and all-around parasite. You've been corrupting my father-in-law for 3 years, destroying my county for profit, and tonight you threaten my wife. Please, Maurice gasped. Whatever they're paying you, I can double it. They're not paying me anything. This is personal. Ryan increased the pressure slightly, drawing a thin line of blood. You're going to write a confession. Every crime, every bribe, every threat. Everything the FBI needs to clean up this mess you've created. I won't. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, I'll keep you alive for days while I introduce you to techniques I learned in places that don't exist. Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. Your choice, Maurice. Quick death after confession, or slow death after I run out of patience. Morris's confession filled 17 pages with detailed accounts of corruption, murder, and extortion spanning 5 years. When he finished writing, Ryan allowed him exactly 30 seconds to pray before sliding the knife between his ribs and into his heart. Clean death, Ryan told Harold as they prepared to leave. More than he deserved. Harold stared at the bodies, his face pale, but his eyes clear for the first time in years. What happens now? Now the FBI gets an anonymous tip about a warehouse full of evidence. The Kellerman family discovers their money man is dead and their records are missing. And you get to go back to being a judge instead of a criminal. They walked out of the warehouse together, leaving behind 3 corpses and enough evidence to destroy a criminal empire. Ryan had crossed another name off his list, and the night was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Hammer Falls. The FBI raid on the Kellerman warehouse made the front page of every newspaper in 3 counties. By sunrise, federal agents had recovered enough evidence to indict half the county government, several dozen police officers, and most of the city council. The carefully organized corruption network that had taken years to build collapsed in a matter of hours. Ryan watched the news coverage from his home office, monitoring multiple feeds while tracking the ripple effects of his night's work. Rebecca sat beside him, still processing the transformation of her husband from suburban consultant to cold-blooded executioner. The FBI found Morris's confession, Ryan explained, pointing to one of the monitors showing agents carrying boxes from the warehouse, along with financial records, recorded conversations, and detailed documentation of every bribe and fixed case from the past 5 years. What about the bodies? Self-defense, according to the narrative I've constructed. Maurice was meeting with an informant when rival gang members attempted to rob the operation. The informant escaped during the confusion. Ryan's fingers danced across the keyboard, accessing news feeds and police reports in real time. 3 dead criminals, 1 missing witness, and enough evidence to justify a federal task force. Rebecca studied her husband's profile, trying to reconcile the methodical killer with the man who made coffee every morning and remembered to put the toilet seat down. You planned all of this from the beginning, didn't you? Even before you caught me with Nick. I've been planning something like this since I arrived in this county. Your affair just provided the perfect catalyst. Ryan switched to a different monitor, showing traffic camera footage of the courthouse. I spent 2 years identifying the corruption network, mapping the relationships, understanding the power structure. I was waiting for the right moment to act. And my betrayal gave you that moment. Your betrayal gave me the motivation. There's a difference. Ryan turned in his chair to face her directly. I could have exposed the corruption through legal channels, but that would have taken years and might not have been successful. This way, justice is immediate and absolute. Rebecca's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Her father's name appeared on the screen, and Ryan nodded for her to answer. Daddy? Are you all right? Harold's voice was shaky but relieved. Rebecca, thank God. The FBI has been here all morning, but they're treating me as a witness rather than a suspect. They found Morris's confession, and it backs up everything I told them about being coerced. That's wonderful news. They want me to testify before a grand jury about the extent of the corruption, help them understand how the network operated. Ryan was right. They're more interested in rolling up the entire organization than prosecuting the victims. Ryan took the phone. Harold, this is important. When you testify, stick to the facts about your own experiences. Don't speculate about what happened to Maurice or who might have been responsible for exposing the operation. Of course, Ryan, I can't thank you enough for what you've done. You saved my life, my career, my reputation. Save the gratitude for later. We're not finished yet. Ryan's tone was grim. The Kellerman family is going to be looking for someone to blame for this disaster. They'll come for you first, since you were Morris's primary contact in the courthouse. The FBI offered me protective custody. Accept it. Stay in protective custody until this is over. Ryan glanced at Rebecca, including her in the conspiracy. And Harold? If anyone asks about your son-in-law's background or capabilities, you know nothing. I'm a simple security consultant who got lucky with some information. After ending the call, Ryan turned his attention to the final phase of his plan. The Kellerman family's response to Morris's death would be swift and violent, but he was counting on their predictability. Criminals like the Kellermans always reacted to threats with escalation rather than strategy, which made them easy to manipulate. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know you have what belongs to us. Return it, or face consequences. Ryan smiled grimly. The bait had been taken. They want to meet, he told Rebecca. Tonight. Pier 19 at the marina. They think I'm Morris's informant, the one who escaped during the robbery. You're going to meet with them? That's suicide. No, that's the end game. Ryan stood and walked to his weapons cabinet, selecting items with the care of a craftsman choosing tools. They expect to find a frightened witness they can intimidate into silence. Instead, they're going to find something much more dangerous. Rebecca watched him prepare for war with growing horror. How many people are you planning to kill? However many it takes. Ryan checked the action on his assault rifle before sliding it into a custom carrying case. The Kellerman family has poisoned this county for decades. They've corrupted officials, destroyed families, and murdered anyone who stood in their way. Tonight, that ends. And then what? You just go back to being a suburban husband like nothing happened. Ryan paused in his preparations, considering the question seriously. I don't know if that's possible anymore. Too many people are dead. Too many secrets have been exposed. Things between us can never go back to what they were. Because of my affair. Because of everything. Your affair, my response, the violence that followed. It's all connected now. Ryan closed the weapons case and looked at her directly. You wanted excitement, Rebecca. You wanted passion and danger and a life that mattered. Congratulations. You got it. As darkness fell over the county, Ryan prepared to eliminate the final obstacle to his version of justice. The Kellerman family had ruled through fear and corruption for too long, believing themselves untouchable because they'd never faced a real predator. Tonight, they would learn the difference between a criminal and a soldier. And tomorrow, Rebecca would discover whether she could live with being married to a man who brought war to anyone who threatened his territory. Chapter 8. Blood in the Water. Pier 19 stretched into the dark water like a finger pointing toward oblivion. Ryan arrived 2 hours early, using the time to position himself in the abandoned warehouse overlooking the marina. His sniper's nest provided perfect coverage of the entire meeting area while keeping him invisible to anyone approaching by land or water. 3 vehicles arrived at 11:30 p.m., 2 black SUVs and a sedan that screamed federal protection. Ryan smiled grimly through his scope. The Kellerman family had brought serious firepower, but they'd also brought exactly what he'd hoped for. Edgar Swanson, the family patriarch himself. Swanson was 68 years old, built like a bull despite his age, and carried himself with the arrogance of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. He'd spent 40 years building his criminal empire, corrupting officials and eliminating threats. Tonight would be his last mistake. Ryan's earpiece crackled with a transmission from the listening device he'd planted on Rebecca's car. She was supposed to be home, safe and out of the line of fire. Instead, her voice came through clearly as she spoke to someone in her passenger seat. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" Rebecca asked. A man's voice answered, "Nick Ward. He's going to get himself killed, Becca. Or he's going to kill them all and become the same kind of monster he's fighting against. Either way, you lose." Ryan's blood turned to ice. Rebecca had contacted Nick, brought him into the equation despite explicit orders to stay away. His wife was about to interfere with the most dangerous operation of his career. "Rebecca," he whispered into his throat mic, "if you can hear this, turn around and go home. Now." But she was already getting out of her car in the marina parking lot, Nick beside her with his service weapon drawn. They moved toward the pier with the clumsy urgency of amateurs playing at being heroes. On the pier, Edgar Swanson checked his watch and gestured to his men. "Where is this informant?" Maurice said he was reliable. "Maybe he got smart and ran," suggested one of the bodyguards. "Nobody runs from us. Not in this county." Swanson's voice carried the flat certainty of a man accustomed to absolute power. "Find him. Search every building, every boat, every shadow until you do." Ryan had 2 choices: maintain his position and complete the mission while his wife walked into a crossfire, or abandon the high ground to protect her. For a soldier, it wasn't really a choice at all. He was moving before his conscious mind made the decision, rappelling from the warehouse window and sprinting toward the pier with his rifle in full assault configuration. The Kellerman soldiers spotted him first, their shouts echoing across the water as they brought their own weapons to bear. The firefight erupted in a chaos of muzzle flashes and ricocheting bullets. Ryan moved like liquid death, using shipping containers and pier supports for cover while systematically eliminating targets. His military training took over completely, reducing the world to sight pictures and kill zones. 2 Kellerman soldiers went down in the first 10 seconds. A third managed to get behind cover before Ryan's next burst found him. But there were too many of them, and they had better positions. That's when Nick Ward proved he was still a cop underneath the corruption. Instead of hiding behind Rebecca, he moved to flank the remaining Kellerman soldiers, his service weapon barking in the darkness as he provided covering fire for Ryan's advance. "Left side, 2 targets." Nick shouted over the gunfire. Ryan adjusted his attack, using Nick's distraction to close the distance. The partnership lasted exactly 43 seconds before a rifle bullet punched through Nick's chest, spinning him around and dropping him to the pier planks. Rebecca screamed and ran toward her fallen lover, exposing herself to the crossfire. Ryan had to choose again, complete his mission or save his wife. This time, there was no hesitation. Ryan broke cover and sprinted toward Rebecca, reaching her just as Edgar Swanson emerged from behind a shipping container with a shotgun aimed at her head. "Drop your weapon," Swanson commanded. "Drop it, or I paint the pier with her brains." Ryan's rifle stayed trained on Swanson's center mass. "Let her go, Edgar. This is between you and me." "Is it? You killed my nephew, destroyed my operation, cost me millions of dollars and dozens of men." Swanson's finger tightened on the trigger. "I think your wife makes perfect payment for damages. Your nephew was a parasitic piece of shit who got exactly what he deserved. Ryan's voice carried no emotion, but his eyes burned with killing fury. Same as you're about to get. I don't think so. You see, I know all about you, Ryan Summers. Former Special Operations, dishonorable discharge for excessive violence, currently wanted by military police for war crimes in Afghanistan. Swanson smiled coldly. Did you tell your wife about the village you burned? The civilians you executed? The children? Ryan's shot took Swanson in the throat, silencing him permanently. The crime boss dropped to his knees, clutching his ruined windpipe as blood flowed between his fingers. Ryan walked over and put a second bullet in his head, ensuring the job was finished. The pier fell silent except for the lapping of water against the pilings and Rebecca's sobbing over Nick's body. Ryan methodically checked each fallen enemy, confirming kills and collecting weapons. When he finished, 8 men lay dead on the weathered boards. Is he alive? Ryan asked, kneeling beside Nick. Rebecca looked up with tears streaming down her face. Barely. We need to call an ambulance. No ambulances. No police. No witnesses. Ryan checked Nick's pulse, finding it weak but steady. I can stabilize him, but then we leave. All of us. What about the bodies? What about them? By tomorrow, the FBI will find evidence linking all these men to multiple unsolved murders. Self-defense will be the obvious conclusion. Ryan began field dressing Nick's wound with practiced efficiency. The Kellerman family is finished. The corruption network is broken. Justice has been served. Rebecca stared at her husband as he worked to save the man who'd been fucking his wife. Why are you helping him? Because you love him. And despite everything you've done, I still love you enough to try saving what matters to you. Ryan's hands never paused in their work, but his voice carried a finality that chilled her blood. But this is the last time, Rebecca. After tonight, we're done. All of us. As sirens wailed in the distance, Ryan finished his field treatment and helped Rebecca carry Nick to her car. The county was free of the Kellerman family's influence. Her father's reputation was saved, and the corruption network had been dismantled. But the cost had been measured in blood and betrayal, and some things could never be undone. The war was over. Now came the reckoning. Chapter 9, Ashes and Endings. 6 months later, Ryan Summers sat in his lawyer's office reviewing the final divorce papers. The settlement was simple and brutal. Rebecca got nothing except her freedom. The house, the accounts, the investments, everything stayed with Ryan, purchased with blood money and defended with violence. She's not contesting any of the terms, his attorney, Jeffrey Wilkins, explained. Given the circumstances, I think she's grateful you're not pressing criminal charges for conspiracy. Ryan signed the documents without emotion. She made her choices. Now she lives with them. Through the office window, he could see the courthouse where Harold Miller had resumed his duties as a respected judge. The corruption investigation had resulted in 43 indictments and the complete restructuring of county law enforcement. Harold's testimony had been crucial in securing convictions, and his cooperation had earned him immunity from prosecution. The federal task force had officially closed the Kellerman investigation after ruling the Marina shootout as justifiable homicide. Edgar Swanson and his men had been linked to 17 murders, and Ryan's actions were classified as citizens' defense against organized crime. The story had made him something of a local hero, though he found the irony nauseating. There's one more matter, Jeffrey continued, sliding another folder across the desk. The military has officially closed their investigation into your service record. All charges dropped, honorable discharge reinstated. Apparently, your assistance with the Kellerman case impressed some important people in Washington. Ryan accepted the folder without opening it. His past in Afghanistan would remain buried, along with the villages that no longer existed and the children who would never grow up. Some sins could never be absolved, only carried. His phone buzzed with a text message. Rebecca, checking in for the 3rd time this week. She was living in Sacramento now, working as a paralegal and trying to rebuild her life. Nick Ward had survived his injuries but been permanently disabled by nerve damage. He'd lost his job, his pension, and his wife, but Rebecca had stayed with him through the recovery. Love, Ryan supposed, had strange expressions. Will you be responding? Jeffrey asked, noticing the message. No point. We said everything that needed saying 6 months ago. Ryan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the county he'd purged with fire and blood. She chose her side. I chose mine. There's nothing left to discuss. The truth was more complicated, but Ryan had learned to live with complicated truths. He'd given Rebecca multiple chances to end her affair, to choose their marriage over her infatuation with Nick Ward. When she'd continued lying and betraying him, he'd responded with the only language he understood: absolute and total war. Some might call it excessive. Ryan called it justice. His phone rang. A number he didn't recognize, but a voice he remembered. Oliver Steele, his former commanding officer in Afghanistan. Ryan, I heard about your recent adventures in civilian law enforcement. Oliver, still collecting other people's secrets for the government. Something like that. I'm calling because we have a situation developing in Eastern Europe. The kind that requires someone with your particular talents and flexible morality. Oliver's voice carried the weight of classified operations and black budgets. Interested in getting back in the game? Ryan considered the offer. 6 months of suburban retirement had taught him that peace was overrated. He was a weapon, forged in violence and tempered by betrayal. Sitting in an empty house, playing at normal life was slowly driving him insane. What kind of situation? The kind where bad people need to disappear and good people need protecting. Private military, deniable operations, complete autonomy in the field. Oliver paused. And revenge on a scale that would make your recent work look like practice. Through the window, Ryan watched a young couple walking hand in hand toward the courthouse, probably applying for a marriage license. Full of hope and trust and naive faith in forever. He'd been that stupid once, believing in love and loyalty and happily ever after. When do I start? Tonight, if you're ready. There's a plane waiting at the regional airport. Destination classified. Mission parameters to be briefed en route. Ryan ended the call and gathered his documents. The divorce papers, the military records, the deed to a house he'd never returned to. All the debris of a life he was leaving behind. As he walked out of the lawyer's office, his phone buzzed with another message from Rebecca. I know you'll probably never forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did. I'm sorry for everything. This time, Ryan did respond. Forgiveness is for people who deserve second chances. You chose Nick over our marriage. Live with that choice. He deleted her number from his contacts and drove toward the airport, leaving behind the suburban battlefield where he'd waged his most personal war. Rebecca would rebuild her life with Nick Ward, assuming they could survive the guilt and trauma of what their affair had cost. Harold Miller would continue dispensing justice from his bench, forever grateful to the son-in-law who'd saved his career and reputation. And Ryan Summers would return to what he'd always been. A hunter of men in the shadows between nations, carrying his scars and his sins into wars that couldn't be won, only survived. The plane taxied down the runway as evening settled over the county. Ryan didn't look back. There was nothing behind him worth seeing, and the future held the only promise that mattered. Enemies to kill and justice to deliver, one bullet at a time. Some men were built for peace. Others were forged for war. Ryan Summers had finally remembered which one he was. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.